Welcome to the Black Writers Studio, a podcast presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation and hosted by Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman. The Black Writers Studio is dedicated to showcasing Black writers who are transforming the world today with their literary pen and creating a legacy for the culture. Marita Golden is the author of 19 works of fiction and nonfiction. Her most recent work of nonfiction is The Strong Black Woman: How a Myth Endangers the Physical and Mental Health of Black Women. She is the recipient of many awards, including the Writers for Writers Award presented by Barnes & Noble and Poets and Writers. She has won an award from the Authors Guild and the Fiction Award for her novel After, awarded by the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Marita Golden has lectured and read from her work internationally. She is co-founder of the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation and is a veteran teacher of writing. She has taught at the University of Lagos in Nigeria and has served as a member of the faculties of the MFA Graduate Creative Writing Programs at George Mason University and Virginia Commonwealth University. In addition, she has served as Distinguished Writer-in-Residence within the MA Creative Writing Programs at Johns Hopkins University, Prince George's County Community College, and the University of the District of Columbia. As a literary consultant, she offers writing workshops, coaching, and manuscript evaluation services. When I think of you, Marita Golden, the list is just endless. You're such an inspiration. Not only are you a prolific writer, and the co-founder of the Hurston Wright Foundation, but you also are the co-founder of other organizations and opportunities for Black writers. And what I learned only recently is that you are a child of Washington, D.C., my hometown. I was born in Washington, D.C. as well. So I had no idea. So all of the things that you do in our community and that have such a national, international reach, you are a DC girl, right?
Where did you go to school?
So I was born in Washington, D.C. I was my parents lived near Malcolm X Park. I was born in the Columbia Hospital of Women, but
I was born there too.
No way. But I actually was raised. So my parents, I lived in DC the first 6 years of my life before my mother moved us to the county. And then we just lived in the surrounding Maryland suburbs. But DC, when you're born in DC, that leaves an imprint. Yeah. And so when I think of you, I think of the workshops that I've attended, facilitated by you at MLK Library, which is where I learned to read. I think of you when I think of all of the wonderful anthologies that you've put together. You are just a tour de force. You are beyond brilliant, beyond the matriarch of our literary community here. And I just feel so honored to have you here today to talk about many things. I hope to get to your new book that's out, The Strong Black Woman, and the myth. I just want to start, first of all, with how are you doing during this global pandemic that we are in right now? As such a busy writer, what has these last 2 years been for you? How have they been?
First, I want to say you are part of the new genius team at Hurston Wright. And I was sharing with Audrey Hipkins, the chair of the board, recently, that the two most important decisions I made around Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation are: one, to co-found it with Clyde McIlvaine, and two, to know when it was time to step aside. And I'm very proud and very pleased of the new leadership team. I'm beyond ecstatic that you are part of it. And thank you for all the generous praise. I'm doing fine. I find that, like many creatives that I know, the last 2 years have been extraordinarily productive for many of us, we're kind of loners anyway. And the fact that we couldn't go out and do things forced us to create, forced us to, I would have been doing something anyway, but the fact that I was under quarantine for a long time made me more productive. And the new book, The Strong Black Woman, was written with a powerful sense of urgency. That is, knowing that we work, all these issues around health, mental health, social justice, were literally kind of pressing in on me as I wrote the book. So I kind of feel like I almost wrote it kind of in a fever. So a good fever. So the last 2 years have been very good for me. Very, very productive, very, very bountiful in many ways. And my family, my son has a daughter who was born during the pandemic, and she's beautiful, walking around 15 months. And my grandson's just gotten accepted to a bunch of schools, ODU, LSU, Kent State. And the thing I love about him is that he's a star football player at H.D. Woodson High School, and he's a valedictorian.
Wow.
Yes, and he's
a scholar and an athlete.
Exactly.
Wow.
And his emphasis is on the scholarship. And he's not even sure he's going to play football in college. He probably want to focus on the academics. So
so he's Paul Robeson in the making, right?
I love that.
I love that. Congratulations to him.
I love that. My husband's health is fine. So yeah, it's been a good time for me.
Well, that's wonderful. And so sharing that this has been a good time, but knowing that this topic, the strong Black woman, I'm sure in your lifetime, you've had that characteristic applied to you, particularly because of all the things that you do, and all the things that you seem to do, just that you excel in, right? That there's no limit to what you can do, to what you can withstand. What about this book really pushes back against this idea that Black women are, can bear all burdens and just still show up to be fabulous and unbothered, right?
Well, I'll talk briefly about the genesis of the book. I kind of had a little episode one weekend in 2019, right after Christmas, and I felt like I was having a stroke, dizzy. But the strange thing was that I could exercise. I felt fine, but I felt bad at the same time. Went to the emergency room. They checked me out. My blood pressure went down. And then they said, well, why don't you go see your primary care doctor? So when I went to see him, he said, well, look, you're fine now. I don't see anything wrong. And you said the symptoms are gone, but let's just check you out. So he had me have an MRI, which is where they do a brain scan. And I found that, now this was not related to what I was experiencing that weekend, all the symptoms which had gone. But he discovered, the MRI revealed that sometime in the distant past, and they could tell from what they saw in my brain that it was a while back, I had had 2 silent strokes. Now, a silent stroke, they're very common. I could be having a silent stroke right now as I'm talking to you, have no knowledge of it, would just bam, go like that. But it would kill some brain cells. So I had erected this image of myself as really invincible, physically, mentally, spiritually. And I did all the right things. Meditate since my 20s, walking, dieting, vegetarianism, spirituality, the whole 9 yards. So I had erected this image of myself. I'm a strong Black woman. I'm not supposed to be having a stroke. Right. Even a tiny silent stroke. I'm not ever supposed to have that. And so as I walked out of my doctor's office, I remembered that my mother had died of a stroke. Oh, wow. In fact, she'd had 2 severe strokes, one she recovered from and the one that was fatal. And my father died of a heart attack. So I have stroke and heart attack in my family. Then I remembered that one of the reasons that I've been so militantly healthy in terms of my practices throughout my life is because they died when they were quite young, at 62 and 63. Yeah. So, but I still said, darn it, I'm a strong Black woman. This isn't supposed to happen to me. So because I live through stories. Everything is a story. And so I came home and I started researching on the internet because remember now we're in the midst of a pandemic. Everybody's talking about mental health. Everybody's talking about health. George Floyd has been killed. And so the mental health of Black people is off the charts. So I saw that online, there was this really vigorous discussion about Black women's mental health and specifically the strong Black woman. And that a lot of us scholars, journalists, regular women, 70-year-old women, 20-year-old women were saying, look, it's time for Black women to sit down. We do enough, we do too much. And so I said, they're actually right. And since the strong Black woman had been such a powerful mantra and inheritance in my life, I wanted to write something about it, to begin thinking about it, interrogating it, dissecting it. And that's what I do in the book.
So is it a memoir? I know that you have such a rich history of writing memoir pieces, but also pieces that focus. I don't think everyone knows that you also, your writing career actually started as a journalist. So when you approach this book, is it as a journalist? Is it memoir style? How would you say the reader would kind of place this genre wise?
Well, the book was written in a format that I have used for previous books, Saving Our Sons, Raising Black Children in a Turbulent World, and Don't Play in the Sun, One Woman's Journey Through the Color Complex. And because of my training as a journalist and because of all the memoir writing I've done, I use a style that I call communal memoir. And that's where I will start writing the story from a very personal perspective. And then as the story develops, I will bring in the stories of other people who will enlarge it. And I will talk to professionals who studied it, scholars who've written about it. And so in this case, I know I said, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, but I'm a storyteller. And so I use that format. And I could read a little paragraph or two to give everybody a little taste of it. Is so that, I mean, this is a book that has everything in it from statistics. And I didn't want it to be a book that was full of negative statistics, because the statistics around the health of Black women are very concerning. I mean, 4 out of 5 of us are obese. We have skyrocketing high blood pressure, skyrocketing rates of developing dementia, diabetes, and our health. We are really in a health crisis. But I didn't want to fill the book with only those statistics. And so I did a couple of things. I talked to Black women, for example, who've been in therapy, and had them tell me their stories of healing, because I wanted to detoxify and destigmatize the idea of going into therapy, because therapy has been enormously helpful for me in my life. And this is a book that travels everywhere from my story of becoming what I call a new age strong Black woman who asked for help, who was willing to recognize that I can't do everything and shouldn't do everything, and I can set boundaries, to a commentary on Black women and rape, to a commentary that ends the book about Their Eyes Are Watching God, and the healing power of stories, and why that is such a healing story. So the response to the book has been extremely enthusiastic, and it's doing very well. And I'm very pleased that sort of quilt-like mosaic format where I'm very personal, and then I'll pull back and I say, well, these are the statistics, and then I'll say, well, this is what you need to do, and then I'll tell a story about how my father, for example, told me healing stories. My mother told me I was going to be a writer. I was going to write a book when I was about 12, which is a very powerful affirmative story. And then my father told me stories of Black history, how Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth belonged to me. So I got affirmative stories from my father, and affirmative stories from my mother. that both predicted my success and lodged me in the power and success of my people. And I talk about how it's important to have stories that heal you and that are affirmative. So I'm just going to read a little bit. And also, one of the things I wanted to do, I want to talk about the fact that we have developed sheroes, you know, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer. And in the mythology, and mythology is very powerful, of these women, we do not allow them to have any cracks in their armor. They have to be invincible. We don't want to hear their doubt or their fear. And one of the things that is really important in writing the book, and what everybody who's trying to dismantle the toxic aspects of the strong Black woman complex feels, is that we have to redefine strength. So that strength is not just bearing all weight, but it's acknowledging that you are vulnerable, that you can be vulnerable, and that in our vulnerability, that can be a source of strength. When I was talking to Dr. Audrey Chapman, who used to have a radio show on WHUR, affiliated with Howard, she said the Black woman is the most neglected person in America. And we're neglected by our families, who rarely say, you know, what can I do for you? Do you need help? Take a day off. We have to save democracy. We have to answer every problem in the family. And we have to learn to honor and respect ourselves and give ourselves joy. But I'm going to read a little section. I had a lot of fun writing the book when I was writing a section called Reimagining the History of My Heart, where I said, okay, what would I say if I was Harriet Tubman and I was going to really tell you what it meant to be me, or Fannie Lou Hamer, or Rosa Parks, and I was going to push aside all that stuff that you all have made up about me and hold on to about me. And this is a section about that I wrote about Rosa. Yeah, this is Rosa Parks. For all that, I was never scared of white people. When a white boy pushed me when I was a little girl, I pushed him right back. My grandmother told me if I wasn't careful, I'd get lynched. I told her, let them lynch me. You can look at me and see the African and the white and the Native American me. There's been things written that of all the women who refused to give up their seat on a segregated bus to a white person, I was most well known because I'm light-skinned. And because of that, the white public in the North would feel more sympathy for our cause. I was still a Negro and light-skinned, but that didn't keep me from having to obey the laws of segregation until I decided not to. Light skin didn't keep me from getting fired from my job as a seamstress at the Montgomery Fair department store. And light skin didn't shield me from the pain of my coworkers refusing to talk to me after the boycott, calling me a troublemaker. Light skin didn't stop the hateful, threatening phone calls and the hate mail that started right after my arrest and followed me wherever I lived for the rest of my life. And I lived a long time. Raymond lost his job too. And because of the stress of the backlash against us and the isolation, we felt like we were in the wilderness. Seemed like Negroes were more scared of me than of white people. And I think that it's those kinds of things that we need to give our sheroes, our heroes, we need to embrace that as well. And when we talk about self-care, which is so important, Rosa Parks did yoga and she studied Buddhism so that she integrated into her activism, which was a part of her life, all of her life, self-care. And when you talk to Black women about, I was talking to therapists for the book and they'd say, you know, Black women are so busy. They come into my office and they're on the phone and they can't put the phone down. And I'll say to them, look, you've got to start finding some time for yourself. I'm going to give you an assignment. I just want you to find each day 5 minutes. That's just you. You could just 5 minutes breathing, 5 minutes drinking a cup of coffee or tea slowly, really enjoying it. 5 minutes with the door closed and doing it. And one of the therapists said, so many Black women said, 5 minutes?
Right.
I can't take 5 minutes for myself. The world will fall apart. So this is a generational generational thing. It started with us, and each succeeding generation of Black women is going to have to keep this conversation going.
You know, I haven't even got a chance to read your book yet. And I don't know if I'm supposed to say that because I'm about to read
Look,
it.
You're too busy.
Right.
You're a busy, strong Black woman.
Right. But let me tell you, I haven't read it yet, but because I know you as a writer, I have recommended your book to the homeschooling groups that I'm in.
Oh,
And
great.
if you can imagine with what's going on with COVID, and now a lot of people who have never homeschooled before now turn into it because of COVID. The refrain is everything that you just said. You know, I don't have time for myself because I'm with my kids 24/7, you know, and I have a group on Facebook, a resource group where folks have joined the group with the expectation of getting resources, how to do lessons and things like that. And I've shared your book because one of the things that I think Black women as parents in general fail to see the connection between how we care for ourselves and that being an extension caring for our children. And I think that your work tends to be and you know, they're even though memoir often, they also are reflections on ways that society operates.
Sure,
and I know you had your previous book where you focused, you talked about Alzheimer's, and you know, we now have that sandwich generation where folks are caring for their parents and their children. And you bring such brevity to the conversation because you're reflecting on all of these things that require us to really make space and be reflective at each step to be able to handle before you get lost and sucked into the madness of what the situation could potentially become. Can you speak to the ways that when you are writing that you're able to stay grounded in the journey of the story without it being all over the place, making those choices as to what to focus on, you know what I mean? Because when we talk about and with this book, The Strong Black Woman, this could go every which way. What was it that led you to stay grounded to the narrative that you chose for this story?
Well, in a way, okay. the book does go every which way, but you can find unity in going every which way. So that there's a chapter, you know, We Wear the Mask, where I write about Black women wearing the mask of strength. And then you have this section that's where I'm just giving myself permission to imagine me as Fannie Lou Hamer. Then I asked a group of Black women to name the books that had healed them. Then I have several conversations, about 6 conversations, where Black women are just telling me the story of healing from trauma through therapy. Now, when you hear that, that sounds every which way, but there's unity. There's unity. For example, I used the comparison of a quilt. And somebody asked me once, what was the favorite part of writing the book? And I said, well, there was no one favorite part. It's like all of it was trying to figure out how to put the puzzle together.
Wow.
And one of the reasons we write books is because we don't know how to write them. We have to write them in order to write them. And they ultimately tell us how to write them. Wow. And so
that's a very spiritual, that I have to pause on that because that gave me goosebumps, because really that the way that you even describe that is like a channeling of sorts, is that you really are this conduit where you're channeling this message. And because you're channeling, you got to wait and see as to where it ends up. And so it sounds like it's a very spiritual practice for you, where you're open to being the receiver of these messages and to really to see where they take you.
Well, you know this, you know, as a poet, a scholar, you know, as a writer, that you are a channel, and you get a story when you've made yourself available, when you know, when those forces in the world that are responsible for the creation of art and beautiful things, communicates with us and says, oh, she's ready. She's not afraid. So I can give her a story about Alzheimer's. You know, she's going to have to figure out how to do it, but she'll handle it because she's available. And I think that the main thing was trusting my voice and my instinctive intelligence. I mean, for example, I knew that to tell the story of Black women in therapy, I'm not a therapist. I knew that it would be sufficient for me in this book to interview several Black women therapists and get some commentary from them, and to talk to maybe 5 or 6 Black women who would talk to me very honestly. I didn't feel that for this book, I had to interview 100 Black women. It wasn't that kind of book. And so what happens is you begin to trust your voice, and you instinctively know how your book will feel, your book will sound, your book will, because you're not writing every other book. I mean, it's very interesting. When my agent was submitting the book to editors, one of them said, well, this is great idea, but we would like you to team up with a therapist. And I said, okay, oh, what you mean is you want me to write a different kind of book. Okay, no problem, no problem. Right. So I will withdraw so you can find someone to write that book. Right. Because I'm Marita Golden and I have a particular storytelling voice. I mean, and for example, my books like Saving Our Sons and Don't Play in the Sun are basically storytelling books, very personally rooted, and yet they've been used in academia, in the academy, so that they're books that heal people and that also can encourage conversation. Right. But I think the main thing is, you know, you said, how do you get control of it? Well, you have to get control of your vision and trust that your vision is okay. You're not writing, I'm not writing your book. I'm writing my book. Your book. But were you always, at what point do you have that aha moment, or can you remember that time where you moved from not trusting your voice or really listening to the noise to really standing firm and saying, this is my voice and I'm going to defend the space and the right to be able to write without having all of these folks in my business telling me what I should write about, how I should write? Did you have that challenge? I know I interviewed someone, a writer, who said that for so very long, they didn't realize until the book they're presently launching that they had ignored the little girl voice and really standing up for themselves and staying true to their own inner voice. Has that been a challenge for you? Was there a moment where you weren't where you are now, firmly aware of who you are and what your voice is as a writer? Well, I think that each time you're writing, you're a virgin. I mean, the book that I just wrote had no idea that I had written 18 other books. So this is an introduction. Hi, I'm Marita. So what? Prove yourself. And so with each book, I find I am learning all over again how to write. But in terms of having a sense of confidence about my voice as a writer, that came to me gradually. And I can't say what one book I now knew that as a Black woman, well, okay, I will say this. Probably one incident around the writing of a book reaffirmed that I could write as daringly as I wanted to. And that was Don't Play in the Sun, A Black Woman's Journey Through the Color Complex. And that was a very difficult book to write. They're all difficult because I was writing about the color complex. And my stepdaughter had called me one day and said, "Oh, Marita, turn on to BET. I know you don't like videos, but there's finally a video that you're going to like." And it was India Arie, and she was singing Video.
Right.
And then she was singing Brown Skin. And I said, "Oh my God, this is wonderful." And just hearing the song opened me to think about writing about a subject that had been an important part of my life. So I sit down, I got this contract and I sit down to write. And even though I'm committed to writing, I'm still afraid because naturally this is a taboo subject. And the only language that we pretty much had up to then, because the language has changed now, for example, today, believe me, you're going to get slapped back if you make a colorist comment. Whereas when I was writing the book, then darker skinned people and even lighter skinned people who would receive comments felt afraid, to say anything. So I was writing a section about how angry. I'd done all this research, darker skinned people make less money. Darker skinned people are sentenced to more time in jail. All of this. Lighter skinned people are told that they're not legitimate. Oh, it's all this.
Right.
So I'm just pissed off about all of it. And so I was very angry. And I had written a draft, and my editor said, "Well, Marita, this is good, but you're not writing." She said to me what I say to myself: "You're not writing deep enough." She said, "You meditate, you pray, go back and start meditating, praying so you can write this book." So then I allowed myself to write about anger. And I was very afraid. I set the timer. I was literally afraid, that if I really wrote on the page how angry I was about what this did to people's lives, what it had done to me to some extent, I would combust. I would literally just catch on fire because it was so hard. So I said, okay, set the timer for 10 minutes and see what happens. And just write as though you're not going to get censored. Write about anger as though the world is going to embrace you when you write about it. So I started writing and the timer went off, and then I just pushed the timer aside and I continued to write. And I think I used the word anger in 2 pages, maybe 12 times. But that was the backbone of the book. That was why I was writing the book. And once I had written that, I could then write from a very deep place. And so that's an experience that confirmed to me that I was a powerful writer and that I had deep feelings, and those deep feelings were to be mined. They weren't to be ignored.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It sounds, and I love how even explaining that process, what you did with yourself is very akin to the types of workshops and writing exercises that you have your students go through.
I tell my students that everything you're going through, I'm going through. Everything I say to you, my editor says to me.
Right. Because I'm imagining you with that timer, because I've been in one of you're an excellent writing instructor, and I just imagine like you're facilitating with yourself, and you actually that's one of the things that when I talk you to the heavens and all the things that you do is that as you engage so fully in the practice of writing and putting out your own books, co-founding these organizations, you also you are actively teaching other writers. You are actively writing and really helping to create this pipeline of not just Black writers. Your workshops are open to everyone, but particularly for Black writers who see themselves in your books. You allow this access, and I would love to learn from you what it is this because you just seem so dimensional. What your writing classes seem to be as forward facing and as integral to who you are as your books and the things that you do. Tell me a little bit about this movement toward not just working within the academy as a, writer of residence and writing professor, but also really making yourself accessible to folks who sign up for your classes in libraries or take your webinar. What is that about?
Well, for me, teaching isn't, for me, teaching people to write or putting them in an environment where that is supportive of their writing journey isn't as much about writing as it is about connecting soul to soul.
Oh, wow.
I like people. I like to be engaged with people. And writing is just the platform, the excuse that we use basically to connect soul to soul. I mean, we say this is a writing class, but actually it's a human connection class. And I taught in the academy for many years. And it was a sometimes satisfying, sometimes very difficult situation as a Black woman teaching in largely white institutions where I felt marginalized, not appreciated. And so when I left the academy and I started doing my own workshops, which I've been doing for the last 15, 16 years, I call it the University of Marita Golden.
That's right. That's right. And they'd be packed too. Let me just say, for those listening, you show up at the library, it's wall to wall people.
I've been doing my best teaching. I mean, it makes a huge, students often talk about not being respected or not being seen or not being valued by their professor or their teacher. But it's equally important that I be felt, be seen and be heard and respected. And very often in particularly writing workshops, in writing programs at white universities, I frankly felt marginalized. And so in the workshops that I do at the University of Marita Golden, I'm working with people who see me, who respect me, who value me. And I'm not dealing with sexism and racism and, I don't want you to do my thesis. I want the white boy who's only done one book. I want him, all that kind of nonsense. But I love teaching because I really value human connection, and writing is just, and I tell people a lot of times, you may not get published. A lot of people don't want to be published. Right. They just want to write their story. Right. And that's extremely valuable because writing, if I hadn't been a memoirist, I don't know how I would have made sense of the life I've lived. It's given me such a bounty of information. I love my parents so much because I've written about them. I understand myself so much because I've written about myself. And the novels are kind of magic where you just create this world. And I stopped asking, why I'm writing. It's just the way I live in the world. But the teaching is very important to me. And it's mostly about connecting with people, human to human. Yes, we're writing, but, and I also stress community. I always encourage the people in my workshops, after this workshop, stay in touch with each other. Form a little support group. This is a very unique thing that you've paid to be in a community of 15 other like-minded people. You found out that you're not the only one who has insecurities, that you're not the only one who has a lot to learn about writing. We've read great stories and you've had the opportunity to dissect and discuss those stories in a supportive group. And so that's a very special thing. And so if you can find one or two people in this environment that you really connect with, stay with them.
And that model really is what exists today with Hurston Wright Foundation, that model that you created in terms of with writing workshops, so much so that we have participants in the writing workshops who have stayed connected based on that model that is part of your ministry, right? So in closing, in there's so many things that I haven't had the chance to ask. So of course that means that you have to come back. But in closing, I would love for you to let folks know where they can get your book. And if you do have any upcoming workshops or anything that's open to the public, if you can just do a little plug of that so that folks can find you online.
Well, my website is maritagolden.com. You can purchase my book anywhere, from your favorite independent bookstore, your favorite Black bookstore, Barnes and Noble. You can even purchase. We love and hate Amazon. We writers, we love and hate Amazon at the same time.
Right.
And I do have some workshops coming up. In February, I'm doing a fiction workshop. You can just go to my website and look on the workshop page. And one of the exciting things I'm going to be doing is in April, Tracy McGee, who is a award-winning writer as well as self-publishing consultant, she and I are going to be doing a workshop on self-publishing. So I'm going to be offering the memoir workshop in March, self-publishing in April, and how to find an agent workshop in May.
Oh, I know those are going to fill up fast. So I recommend everyone to go to your website. And again, that's Marita Golden. Is it .com? .com. Yeah. And then they can even buy the book there. They can buy the book.
Yeah.
Sign up for a class.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Marita
I've enjoyed
Golden.
this, Khadijah.
Oh, I have too. And again, just thank you for all that you do. Thank you for existing, for being you. You really have created I don't think you even realize how far your wonderfulness has extended, but I'm just really pleased to have been able to talk with you today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. And we have to get together for lunch, seriously, when you come up for air.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being part of the Black Writers Studio, and until next time.
Thank you. And thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you.